Welcome to From the Classroom. I'm Nate Quinnell, Superintendent of Schools here in East Hartford, and I really appreciate you tuning into the show. From the Classroom is a show that we shoot every month for all of our faithful viewers, where we try to take an opportunity to kind of go under the hood, if you will, into the classroom and talk about some of the great things going on in your East Hartford Public Schools. And today, we have a special treat. We have a special guest on the show, and I couldn't be more happy to welcome Chairman Bryan Hall to the show. So thanks, Bryan, for coming on.
Glad to be here, Nate. Thank you.
We're glad you're here. And you're a repeat guest on the show.
I am.
So, we're giving notches for numbers of appearances, and I think this is your fourth or fifth time?
Yeah, but they're all in separate years, too. So,
get
me on twice in 1 year, then you can start counting the notches, all right?
Well, you're in competition with our business director, Mr. Manuli. He comes here and talks about the budget. So he doesn't have the freedom of content that you have. So
okay.
It's good to have you.
All right, glad to be here.
So for our viewers at home, Bryan Hall is our chairman, and we couldn't be more lucky to have a chairman like Bryan leading our board. Bryan is committed to kids and fearless when it comes to doing the right thing. And as a superintendent, I couldn't be more appreciative of the opportunity to work for our board and work under Bryan's leadership. And Bryan, I know I've thanked you in private, but certainly in public, I want to thank you for your leadership on the board. Thank you very much.
Nate, right back at you. I want to thank you as well for your dedication, your hard work. I really appreciate the fact that I know you are on the top of the list of many people. I've got phone calls in regards to people talking about how great my superintendent is. And I'm going to say this on your show for the public to hear. I call Nate my superintendent, and I really appreciate you.
It's mutual. So, Bryan, for our viewers who have seen this over the years, they may have heard me ask this question before, but some of our viewers are tuning in for the first time, and we got them right now. This is that opening moment. Mm-hmm. Can you tell people a little bit about you? You're our board chairman, but you're a father, you're a resident. Can you give us a little story of who is Bryan Hall?
Sure, Nate. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. First and foremost, I'm from the city of Hartford, born and raised in the north end of Hartford. And I'm proud to say what we call Project Choice now, that I'm a student of Project Concern. I went to Farmington schools from 6th grade and graduated from Farmington High School. And after that, Nate, I became a Hartford police officer, attended college at CCSU, was in the military in the Army National Guard as a military police officer. And it was during that training in Fort McClellan, Alabama, that I decided that I really wanted to serve my community. I was blessed to have two solid parents. Family of 5, the youngest of 4 boys in the family. So again, when I came back,
I didn't realize there was 5 boys.
5 boys. I'm the youngest of 5.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool having 4 older brothers.
Yeah.
But I did hear it was a benefit of having sisters as well, which I never knew. But I went in the Hartford Police Department, Nate, and it was during that time of working at HPD that I saw young kids hanging out on the street corners. It was really a problem. And where I was working at that time, I decided that I wanted to be proactive instead of reactive. So I remember my days as a young kid, and I was a Cub Scout, never a Boy Scout, because, again, they had no Boy Scout programs in my community. Yeah. So I started a Boy Scout troop. Was given some space in the church on Sigourney Street in the north end of Hartford and started to recruit boys off the street corners. Instead of putting handcuffs on them, I said to them, either come to my Boy Scout meeting on Friday or I'm going to lock you up the next day. So we grew to about 30 boys. And I'm proud to say a lot of those young men who are now in their late 20s and early 30s, one is now a detective on the Hartford Police Department, came from a gang. Another one is a successful manager down in Washington, D.C., graduated from Howard University. So it was at that point that I really felt that I had a passion to help young people to become better adults. Yeah. So after that, of course, of my career there, I went to work for the Boy Scouts of America. They asked me to come work for them and to start programs like the one I started in Hartford. So I was blessed to be able to become a field director over what we call Scout Reach, which is an urban outreach program. So started very successful programs right here in East Hartford. East Hartford, Manchester, Waterbury, New London, Norwich area. And again, for working with them, I was approached because I then moved to East Hartford. I was living at Marlborough at the time. Yeah. And I came to East Hartford, and there were some people that knew my work with the Boy Scouts of America, and I was a retired Hartford police officer, and asked me if I would consider coming onto the Board of Education. And the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, it's not all history because we're still living it.
We're still living it. We're writing history every day.
Yeah, and I love it when you tell that story, and it's really clear that the influences of certainly, your where you grew up, your family, your faith, certainly the Hartford Police Department have influenced the way you approach leadership, and it's neat to see those things play out. So, boards of education, I think, of course, everybody knows and has heard of a board of education, but I think the real work of a Board of Education, what a board does, is something I think a lot of people don't understand. Can you talk to our viewers a little bit about, what is a board? What do boards do, and what's the purpose of our Board of Education?
Thank you. First of all, we're elected officials. So all the board members, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you're selected by your party to run. So I was actually appointed when I first came on. There was a vacancy that was open, so I was appointed. Went up against some other people, and I was selected by the powers that be, I would say, of the Democratic Party to fill that seat. But boards of education are very unique in regards to making sure that policies are kept, making sure that you as a superintendent, and your cabinet are doing their job. But the nice thing I like about it is the fact that the board that we have sitting now is a board that you cannot tell party differences. Yeah. We're a board that works together. We're a board that have taken some, when I say risk, good risk. When we closed Hockenham School, you know the problems we went through with that and the town hall meetings we had to do. But then I sit back now and going into our third year of that, maybe our fourth year, to see what the ECLC has done. But as a Board of Education, I personally am the chairman of the Policy and Audit Committee. So there are different subcommittees that we oversee, making sure that all wheels are running, all gears are in place, and that, as a school board, that we're providing the services that are needed for our students and for our families. And again, working closely with you and your team to make sure that everything that the Board of Education is supposed to do does.
Yeah. It's funny, our public at home, I know at times gets a chance to watch our televised board meetings on Channel 5, and I think at times, a viewer watches a board meeting and says, geez, that's awful boring. And I've heard you say at times a good board meeting is a boring board meeting.
Right.
Why is that? What does that mean?
Because we've already taken care of everything. When I first came on the board, and this is no offense to anyone, our board meetings lasted for hours. There were times that I knew whatever was going to be on the agenda, that there was going to be some conflict. We had a board that I didn't see that worked well together, and I think it was the first time I ever spoke at a board meeting, maybe my third board meeting. I was pretty quiet when I first sat in my seat, just listening, trying to observe, trying to grow, trying to understand. I had never been on a Board of Education before. I had sat on other boards, basically private and nonprofit boards, but I wanted to see where people really were. And I think it was the first thing I said. I said, why are we here? You know what I'm saying? This isn't about us. It's about the students. Yeah. And everything that we do should be geared towards making sure that we're providing the best education for our children. Me personally, I had an invested interest because my kids were going to school here. Yeah. When I moved here, my son is graduating in June. Josh was 2 years old. I can't believe he's graduating, in a few months. But when I moved here, my wife was not too cool with us moving to East Hartford from Marlboro. And I told her I would get involved. And it was the second day of school, before we put you as principal in the middle school, that my oldest son, came home and his shirt had been torn. Yeah. A kid came up to him and said, hey, you're the new kid, we don't like you, and tore his shirt for no reason at all. But he was the bigger man and walked away. And so my thing was, as a board member, that we have to make sure that, first of all, we get along. Yeah. Especially when they're televised, and people would say to me, hey, we enjoy watching your board meetings because you guys are fighting worse than they are on, regular TV. Yeah. So again, my job as a board member was to try to make sure that we work together as a team. Yeah. Even though we're elected officials, still at the end of the day, we should all be on the same page, going for the same purpose to try to reach the same goals.
Right. Yeah, and I think, Bryan, the thing I've been really amazed at with your leadership is we've been able to keep that kid in the center, and to center our work as a board, to lead the board. You've led the board to center their work around what's best for children in the decisions that we make. And these are easy things to say, like this rolls off the tongue, right? Keep kids in the center. That's what everyone should say. But the reality when it comes to a policy agenda to make that happen, the reality when it comes to budget decisions to make it happen, to when we do hiring decisions to make that happen, that's a different walk. And I've watched you lead a board over an extensive period of time now, where, and I can say, so we have a very strong team of administrators here in East Hartford that has been carefully built one by one. But our team feels the support of our board, and that's a really special thing happening. And I think it's allowing what we're seeing happening in our schools right now, and the progress that we're making. And that's a result of that work. So, in addition to your roles here on the East Hartford Board of Education, you play a larger role across the state involved with boards of education. And can you speak about that work at all?
Sure, Nate. I actually sit on the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. I have been appointed to the executive committee now as a member at large. And in that process, I also am an area director. So I oversee Area 2, which is the largest area in Connecticut. I oversee the greater Hartford area, the Middlesex area. So it's been an opportunity for me also to take what we've done here in East Hartford. And it's kind of nice when people ask me, Bryan, what are you guys doing in East Hartford? We're watching. We're seeing change in East Hartford. The nice thing about it is we work as a team, not only on the board, but I have a great relationship with our mayor. I have a great relationship with our town council and our town council chairman. So we have great relationships, and we all understand that we need to work together as a team because the mayor wants people to move into East Hartford, and the town council chairman wants people to move into East Hartford, and as board chairman, I want to make sure that our schools are exciting and our schools are attractive enough that young families want to move into East Hartford. I myself took a chance in coming here. Again, at the time, the schools weren't that great, and it was nothing that couldn't be improved. But the mere fact now that I'm on the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, it gives me a bird's eye view of what's going on across Connecticut, from suburban to urban to rural school districts. And again, I'm very excited and proud to say the work that we're doing in East Hartford, and kudos to you and your team, has been nothing but progress that has been going up and up each and every year. So by serving as an area director, it gives me an opportunity to almost be like a consultant to other school districts. You know, I get phone calls, I get questions answered. I'm working with the executive director, Bob Rader, right now to make some changes of how things are done. So we sort of put together the best practices, methods of how to do things in school districts. So I'm proud to sit in that seat and to feel respected enough amongst my colleagues across the state that people feel comfortable enough to call me and say, Bryan, can you give me advice on this? Or what are you guys doing in East Hartford to make sure that they also are providing the best education for their students as well?
Yeah, it's neat for me to watch too, and to watch you have on a state role. And that is earned, that respect across the state for you and your work with boards of education, which are a really vital cog of basic American democracy.
Yes.
And when we think about, what do people care the most about, number one thing we're always going to say is their kids. Right. Number two, taxes. but it starts with our kids, right. And that's what boards oversee. Right. So kind of bring it home a little bit here. I think when I think of leadership, I think of someone who can set a vision and then who can lead an organization to accomplish that vision, which is something I have to say, and your leadership has been two clear things that have happened. So can you talk to us, the public, at all about your vision and our vision for the board's vision for East Hartford Public Schools?
Sure. One of the things, Nate, I mentioned in the beginning of your show that I am a project concerned student. So my parents felt, growing up in the north end of Hartford, I was going to my neighborhood school, and I was a straight-A student. And my mom, who was in education, my dad was a pastor of a church, so I tell people either I was in the Bible or doing homework. But she felt...
What did your mom teach?
My mom taught at Sands Elementary School. So she was at the old Brackett Northeast. And because that school was so bad, they decided to redistrict that area, and they tore that school down. Yeah. And so she was asked to go to Sands, which was a different model of a Hartford school. They actually had buildings or clusters, they called them, sort of a campus environment, which wasn't the greatest idea because the school was built right in a housing project. Yeah. So the majority of those kids went to that school, almost like a Mayberry Village and Mayberry School relationship. Yeah. But again, my mom felt I wasn't being challenged enough. So when the federal busing program came about, I was one of the first group of students to be bused out of the city of Hartford. And that was an experience in itself. I got met with protest signs. I got met by students who didn't want me there, parents that didn't want me there. But again, my parents who came from the South, when I went home, they said to me, son, you're going to beat this. You're going to deal with this, and it's going to make you grow. So I appreciate them believing in me, but also giving me the challenge. Here in East Hartford, I felt that you shouldn't have to bus a kid to get a good education. I feel that, and nothing again against the busing system, why should I have to get up and ride a bus for 2 hours? I mean, that's an extra hour and a half sleep I could have got at home. So again, I couldn't participate in after-school programs because there was no bus to bring me home. Luckily I had older brothers that would come pick me up, so I could play football, I could play basketball, I could go to school dances, things that were happening in Farmington because there was no after-school bus. So kids that are bused out to schools really don't get the full value of being a student in that school. They go there in the morning, they take their classes, and then they're on a bus going back to Hartford or wherever they live, New Britain, Manchester, but they really don't get the school experience. So I felt that our schools need to be able to not only provide those things, but also give a good education. Our parents shouldn't have to apply to be in a lottery to send their kids outside of East Hartford. So that's where, when I sat down with you as board chairman, we sort of mapped up where we wanted to go and the process we needed to. So that whole Sunset Ridge project, kudos to you and your team. For now, we're an IB district. We've taken some challenges, Nate, that have really been attractive to parents in this town. So now you can have a kid that can go through a whole IB curriculum. Siebel was a great high school and is a great high school. Nice to be ranked #1 in the state, but I felt our pipeline wasn't strong enough, that our kids in East Hartford were going to Siebel and they weren't succeeding because they had never had an IB curriculum. So now we have a PYP program, an NYP program, and then, of course, the IB curriculum for Siebel. That's exciting stuff. So parents no longer have to worry about where their kid's going to end up in a lottery system. They now have great schools here in East Hartford. No matter what neighborhood you live in, whether you live in a housing development or you live in a single-family home, your kid's going to get a good education here in East Hartford.
Yeah, and I think about that vision of these high-quality schools, and tying right into that vision of, schools where our community is deeply proud of the fact that their child goes there. And we think about Sunset Ridge. You were just talking about Sunset Ridge. Previously was an under-enrolled school that was ultimately about 50% of the school empty.
Right.
And now that school is enrolled to capacity with a wait list.
Amen.
So something interesting's happened.
Yes,
there.
it is. Yes, it is. In my campaigning, one of the things I actually targeted one year I was campaigning, going into actually 10 years now. I've been aboard 10 years.
Is that right?
February 9th was my 10th anniversary.
No kidding.
Time flies. And so I want to say it was my second term campaigning. I focused on for sale sign homes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know, why are you selling your house? And it was interesting because a lot of those people that were selling their homes were parents of kids that were in the 6th grade.
Yeah.
And they just felt that our middle school wasn't where it needed to be. And, they were bailing out of town. My neighbor across the street, I live on Heritage Lane, and my neighbor across the street, great family, and with 2 young kids. And when it was time for a kid to go into kindergarten, she actually was an educator in Newington. When it was time for her kid to go to kindergarten, a for sale sign went in front of her house. Yeah. And I had a conversation with them. I was like, well, why are you leaving? And she says, we feel that East Hartford schools aren't ready to educate my child. And that, again, was an eye-opener for me. So when I became board chair, it was like, let's put pencil to paper, let's redraft this thing, let's see what we can do. Yeah. And again, we now see the successes, Nate, of some things that were not ever implemented, things that you and I talked about, pros and cons, what is going to be the end factor of this. And I'm excited to say that everything we've done, because we are risk takers. We do firmly believe that we have done some things that were outside of the box. We've done some things that had never happened before in this town. And now when I see the success of people, when I go to ShopRite or I go to CVS or I'm pumping gas in my car, that people who I don't even know, never met before, know who I am, and they come up and say thank you. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
That's really
They don't let me get in front of them in the checkout line, but again,
not that cool.
they do thank me. And again, I don't get paid for this, but my reward is the fact that every time, when I sit at a graduation and I see our kids graduating, and Matt Ryan tells, the public the percentage of our kids that are going on to higher education, that are going into the military, that have been trained in East Hartford High School, Synergy, all right, to be able to go into the workforce. That's exciting stuff. And there's nothing that can pay you for that. So again, my passion for doing this is not only because of the fact my son's graduating in June, but I'm not going anywhere. Because we still have work to do.
We're not sure we're going to let him graduate.
Well, you know what? His choice of college right now is not my choice of college, because he wants to go to Miami. And he's been accepted, already to 6 great colleges, in the greater New England area, which I've shared with you.
Yeah.
And again, yesterday I picked him up at the high school, and Matt Ryan and I were having a conversation when he came up, and so I shared with Matt Ryan where Josh has been accepted. So Matt's sort of like, oh, that's a great school, that's a great school. One of them is UConn. He got accepted at UConn Stores. And so I'm trying to be a dad and trying to convince him to stay locally. And he's like, not going there. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. So Matt goes, well, where do you want to go? He goes, I'm waiting for University of Miami, who acceptance letters go out April 1st. So, if you can put a plug in for me to try to keep them local, that'd be great.
We'll do what we can do. If not, we get him on a show. We'll do a therapy session with him.
I might need a therapy session.
Yeah.
But again, here's not just because it's my son, but here's one of our own. You're going to have a conversation with him if you haven't already.
Yeah.
He's a pre-K through 12th grade
Yeah.
East Hartford student who scored high on his SAT. Who's getting into colleges. University of New Haven offered him tons of money to go to school there, and he's not going for an easy degree. He's going for a marine biologist. Yeah. So, you should be proud of that. I don't want to take all the credit as a parent, but you should be proud of that as superintendent and all of his teachers and the fact of what we've done. So no one can tell me that East Hartford Public Schools does not put out high-quality students in this state, in this town.
Yeah, there's no question. So you've mentioned, I think, two of our really signature components, and always item A is our students. Our students are our successes. And when we see students like your son who has these options that are sitting there in front of them, and we'd both be kidding ourselves. Josh is a story that there are many stories like him right now in that senior class, is Josh is not an anomaly, which of course Josh is unique and special as every kid is, but that's pretty exciting when we see that. What are some other things that, over the past few years you're really proud of as far as accomplishments? Can you think of
I want to say, Nate, and I mentioned it earlier, is the relationship we have with the mayor and the town council. One of the things that we implemented was the fact of building this budget together. Yeah. So we meet way early before we present before the town council. We meet with the mayor and her team.
Which is highly unusual.
Right, exactly. So I hear...
Well, why is that so unusual across the state? Why does that process not happen?
I've heard some real serious horror stories in regards to mayors not liking board chairs not liking town council chairs. But I think that has a lot to do with the relationship that we've built. I know you personally have a relationship with the mayor and Rich Kehoe, the town council chairman, and so don't I. And we talked about that. That was one of the things that was on our to-do list and one of the goals that we wanted to have to make sure that we could put together this team. I'm a football guy, and the offense cheers on the defense cheers on the offense, and both cheer on the field goal kicker when it's time for them to kick a field goal. And I felt that each one of us brought a component that we weren't working together in unity, that we had to build that relationship. And because of that, we actually have a joint meeting where we sit down and we build the budget together. The mayor sort of gives us the marching orders in regards to where she wants to go, because, again, she wants to make sure that this town is affordable, and the people that are living here that are supporting education, which is the biggest bill on the table, that we are working together to make sure that we're not coming or you're not coming with a budget that's outrageous. You know what I'm saying? That the town council supports and knows what we need. You've cut much fat off your budget, and you usually come in lean anyway. So, again, I think that relationship building has been very important. I'm proud to say that, we have a great relationship, and also the fact that if you look at our board meetings, unless you know where people are sitting at, you can't tell who's who. No. And that's important to me, because at the end of the day, when I came here, and the fact that I know what it takes to build a solid foundation for our young people. I was a law enforcement officer for 20 years in the city of Hartford. I saw many kids succeed when they had good mentorship and they had good education. Yeah. So I knew what it took, the ingredients it needed to take, because a lot of our demographics in East Hartford are the same as here in the city of Hartford. Yeah. We have a lot of single mom parents out there that are, working 2 or 3 jobs, and some of them actually depend on the school system to help raise their child. So whether or not that could be a debate whether the schools should be responsible for raising a child, but we're going to do everything possible to assist that single mom or whoever it may be to make sure that our schools are providing all the necessary resources that we can. Yeah.
So another interesting thing for board members and public understanding is board members' involvement in school life. Mm-hmm. So I know there's different times where residents reach out to board members, as they should, as their constituents. What's the typical path when you speak with a constituent who has a concern or an issue of what do you recommend to them and to how to solve that challenge? What's something that, here I am, I'm watching this today and I need help, right, and I'm going to call Bryan. What is Chairman Hall going to probably tell me today?
Thank you for the question. I firmly believe this. I'm a military man, and in the military there's a chain of command. And I was always told that you don't go from your sergeant to the general. Yeah. So there's a chain of command and there's a process that needs to be followed. So even as board chair, some people feel that they could come directly to me. The interesting thing is that I am the first African American to ever sit in this seat.
Yeah.
So when I was appointed as board chair, and have been for years now, a lot of people that look like me felt that they could skip the pipeline or they could skip the chain of command and come directly to me. And I say this to the public, that even if you go to one of my fellow board members and they come to me, it really starts with you. So people that have come to me, Nate, with whether concern or a question, I always direct them to you as a superintendent. That's part of your job, to make sure that you're serving the parents and answering the questions. And if you feel as superintendent, we have a working relationship that is something I need to get involved with, then so be it. But the main part is I myself as board chair, I always forward things to you or direct it to you, because again, I don't want to take away from what your job responsibility is. So I tell my board the same thing as board chairman. If anyone comes to you, don't answer the question. Say I'll have the superintendent get back to you. It's not putting it to bed, or it's not minimizing it, but it's just the proper what I feel chain of command. Yeah. Even in public sessions at the board meetings, I've had people come up to the mic and they want to direct things, whether it's for you or it's to me. And what do I tell them? The superintendent will get in touch with you. Because again, when I became chair, I sort of changed the timeline of our meetings, because I'm always aware of people's time. And I don't feel that a Board of Education meeting needs to go 4 or 5 hours. I still hear that, And again, I said to you, Nate, our board meetings are going to go no longer than 2 hours, okay? Even as director of the Boy Scouts of America, I'm always aware of people's time. And I always try to keep my board meetings within a 2-hour time frame, and we've been able to do that. Public session, is people can come up and say, but I've also put a time limit on that as well. I just testified in front of the Education Committee at the state, at the LOB building the other day. And the first thing the chairman said is, you got 2 minutes. And as soon as 2 minutes came, a clock went off. And he said, summarize. And that's the way it should be, because again, it's not a back and forth dialogue thing. So to simply answer your question, everything should go to you.
Yeah, and I think we've modeled that off of, obviously, our board's leadership. I feel like a solution, when we have a complex problem, right? There's a problem between a teacher and a parent, problem between a parent and a principal. The solution lies in that room between the two people where the problem is.
Right.
And the more we can work them back to the table to talk together, is the more we have a chance of a long-term solution around a kid.
Right.
And I think a lot of times, and I understand this, this is misunderstood. And this is almost as if you're going to, jump the process and someone's going to come in and make this declaration that's going to change everything. Most problems we have, and these are not, obviously if there's something wrong being done, then of course a board is involved and a superintendent is involved and those things are fixed. But when we're talking about relational challenges that of course come up when we're working with children, working with schools, getting back to the table where the two groups can talk together, listen to each other, and understand each other. And your insistence on our administrative model that we're going to listen to people, we're going to hear people, we're going to work with people, and we're going to be consistent and fair. That's a policy that I think is very clear for our administrators, very clear for our teachers, and really clear for our community, and we thank you for that. So, kind of looking forward, and in a really short, tight snapshot here, what are you most looking forward to for the Board of Education right now? What are we most looking forward to?
I'm looking forward, Nate, to, as you know, when we do our budget and we do line item by line item, we have a very large expense in kids that are leaving our district. We're responsible for paying for those kids, whether they go to CREC, when they go to the rest. We still have to pay that. That's out of our budget. So my long-term goal is to have very few kids leaving this district. To be able to have parents, moving into town because of what's happening here in East Hartford Public Schools. And again, that money can be used as resources for our own children. So that's really where the top of my goal is, to minimize the amount of students that are leaving our district for whatever reason. I myself know about the schools that are being built. So you go to an open house at a CREC school, they have Taj Mahals. Right? It's kind of nice. I guess you walk into a school and there's built-in aquariums in the wall, and, there's a planetarium in the school. That's great. But that has nothing to do with the curriculum. that has nothing to do with the success of that student down the line. You know, no student is going to say while they're in college, hey, my school had aquariums in it, you know. And again, we're dealing with schools that were built, you know, in the 50s, 60s, and the 70s.
Yeah.
But I'm proud to say when I walk into our schools, floors are clean. You know, we've done a great job. Our new director of facilities has done a phenomenal job in beautifying our schools.
Yeah.
And again, so our job is to make sure that parents are not interested in the open choice program. They're not interested in taking their kid out of the East Hartford neighborhood schools. They're not interested in sending their kid for a 2-hour bus ride to get a high school education. We're going to eliminate that, and we're going to eliminate that by the things that we're doing, consistency, and the numbers that are coming back in regards from the State Department of Education of the work that we're doing here in East Hartford. Phenomenal things are happening. And again, you know, I've signed you to a long-term contract, so I'm publicly saying that. It's all about relationship building, and I appreciate the relationship that we've built.
That's right back at
I've appreciate the relationship that your team feels that they have with me. And again, you know, as a team, it's great to come in and have a winning team and take over. But you know what's even more important is to build a team, to build a solid team. So that's where I want our schools to be, where everyone is being educated.
Well, that's a huge vision, you know, to take a line out of Field of Dreams, you build it, they'll come.
Yes.
And Bryan, I really appreciate the time you took with our viewers today. You had a really neat snapshot of a very high-level sense of what we're doing as a board, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Always.
Really appreciate it.
All right, so let's see, 2018, it's March, so I'll be able to come back in a few months. All right?
Thank you.
After graduation.
That's
Thanks,
all
Nick.
from the classroom. Hope you tune in next time. See you then.